Ooh, girl, you looking like your native cousins. Have you ever like caught yourself at a particular angle in on a camera or in a picture or in a mirror, and there's something about that angle you're like, girl, you looking like your people. Rant. Side note: a lot of Americans say that. They're like, oh yeah, I'm part Native American, and you're like, okay, but which tribe? And they just throw a tribe. They throw the biggest tribes out there, which anybody could claim because how are you going to track it? And they ain't. You just saying it because you think it sounds cool. But anyway, every now and then my mom will look at me and she's like, you look like my mother's people. You're more and more. She's like, you're looking like my mother's people. It's here. It's in the cheekbones. But there's also a part of that because I do have some Eastern European ancestry as well on another side, on the opposite side of my family. And it's like, because I said every now and then I have people who are like, your cheekbones. And I'm like, yeah, it's coming from both sides of the family. Anyway, how did we get here? The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. I finished this book actually back late winter / early spring. And the reason why I have let this book sit for so long is because I've been intimidated to review it for so long. It's one of those books that I had to let marinate. And the only other book to date in the past year that I had to let marinate like this, burping, was Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno was a challenge for me to read. I still think about Dante's Inferno probably on a weekly basis, and it's sitting right here actually because I think I want to read Purgatory soon, maybe next year. Next year is in like a few weeks. I feel like I should have. This is a rant, not a rant. This is a ramble. I feel like I should have included Dante's Inferno in the list of books that have greatly influenced my reading, as well as War and Peace. I'll do a part 2 to that video as well because I should have included Dante's Inferno. Because it was such a challenge and it was so far out of my comfort zone. Myth of Sisyphus is another one of those reads for me. Myth of Sisyphus. Okay. Ooh. I just typed this review out, the draft of it, last night, so there's probably some typos in here. But let's dive right in because this is going to be lengthy. I'm going to ad-lib some of this as well. Because again, it was very intimidating to review. And it was not the easiest read. Seeking what is true is not seeking what is desirable. So the Myth of Sisyphus by, there's a typo, like I said, not Albert. My computer corrected it to albeit. Bro, it's a slim volume. It's nonfiction. I mean, this is slim. My volume is literally 138 pages long. That is short. It took me months to read this. Because I could really only process like 5 to 10 pages at a time because each page was so jam-packed with just stuff, good stuff. It's a philosophical text. It's an existential text. It is, like I said, nonfiction. And I'm probably going to, this is what I hate about social media right now. I have to edit myself with this review, which I think is not free speech because there are certain words that are triggering, which I'm not making light of those words, but the text is about when people unalive themselves. Why do people unalive themselves? And I'm going to have to use that phrase because I don't have time for it. If I say the word that starts with an S and ends with "ide," YouTube's going to suppress this video. Same with Instagram. Okay. So it's a text observing why do people unalive themselves? Why do people have, these types of thoughts? Why do they even contemplate it? And Camus lays out the framework that he thinks that people do this is because, there's an existential crisis going on between the internal man and the external world. And oftentimes what the internal man is forced to project to the outside world that's at odds with who he really is. And don't get all politically correct in my comments. Humankind, I'm using the terminology that Camus uses. Man, get out of your feelings. Don't get triggered. I'm spicy today. This is just how language works. It's okay. You'll be all right. So he explores that existential crisis in the void, and he calls it the absurd. And then he reconciles this with, it's when man starts to create through art and literature. That is the anecdote. The antidote, not the anecdote. It is the antidote to this Kalia and this absurdity that man is dealing with. This is for the sake of length. I mean, not that I minded but length in the first place when it comes to my videos. I definitely have more long form content. But again, I'm going to ad-lib this, and I'm going to throw the theme up there as I typically do. I'm going to analyze on the spot and then dive into these quotes. So first, Camus does discuss why he believes that men unalive themselves or have these types of thoughts, even if they don't carry out the act. Why is it? And it is such, in my opinion, a very sympathetic, empathetic view of it. I'm of the view that it is very dismissive to just say, get over yourself, or you don't need to do that, or whatever the case may be, because you don't know what's going on in somebody's head. You never know what someone's dealing with, right? In a sense, again, I'm going to be editing myself because YouTube is picky with language. To me, it's a control of language what irritates my soul. In a sense, and as in melodrama, offing yourself commits to confessing. It is confessing that life is too much for you and that you don't understand it. It is merely confessing that is not worth the trouble. Living naturally is never easy. You continue making the gestures commanded by existence for many reasons, the first of which is habit. Dying voluntarily implies that you have recognized, even instinctively, the ridiculous character of that habit, the absence of any profound reason for living, the insane character of that daily agitation, and the uselessness of suffering. What a quote, right? What a quote. Like the leap is accepting at its extreme. You'll be able to see the quote. Why I'm bleeping, I'm editing myself, which irritates me. Everything is over, and man returns to his essential history, his future, his unique and dreadful future. He sees and rushes toward it. In its way, settles the absurd. It engulfs the absurd in the same death. This offs himself because on the metaphysical plane, he is vexed. In a certain sense, he is taking his revenge. This is his way of proving that he will not be had. The same rhythm, this path is easily followed most of the time, but one day the why arises and everything begins, and that weariness tinged with amazement begins. This is important. Weariness comes at the end of the acts of a mechanical life, but at the same time it inaugurates the impulse of consciousness. What a writer. And this is translated from the French. But so kudos to the translator, but the translator had to have some really good stuff to work with. And just the way that Camus strings his sentences together and his thoughts together is just, he just takes a topic like this that is really heavy and really gets you and just really makes you think. And he words it in a way that is just so poetic. And you're like, man, this man is speaking facts. I know that I'm a slim person. Okay. Side note, I'm a slim person, but your girl can throw down, okay? I told one of my good friends, she's funny. I told her how many calories I consume a day. And she was like, how? I was like, girl, I never knew that so much of my adult life would be spent worried about protein. Protein and calories. Okay. Side note, I have people, you don't need to worry about calories. You're already fit. And I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm getting enough calories. My body is a temple. I have one body. I want to treat it well. I treat it well, it's going to treat me well, right? I have one body, people. You have one body. Treat it well. Take care of it. Go get some fresh air. Get that heart rate going. Go sweat. Go find your version of exercise that is your jam. It's not always lifting weights. It could be dance. This is me. It could be walking. It could be running. It could be rowing. It could be swimming. It could be picking up a sport. Like, treat your body well and it will treat you well. That's my TED Talk for today. So in these quotes, Camus keeps using the word absurd. Absurd. What is the absurd? And again, the absurd is this tension that man, this is my paraphrase of it, it's this tension of man and the world, man and habit, man and having to put on this face when life is hard and you're tired and you're going around, this, what he calls habit. You're dealing with the mundanity of life, and you're like, life ain't lifing. It ain't hitting like it used to hit. It ain't slapping like it used to slap. You're at odds with what you want and what you're experiencing. That's how I break down the definition of the absurd. And yeah, it's this disgruntlement between man and the void that you can often experience in life. He feels within him his singing for happiness and for reason. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. Preach. This must not be forgotten. This must be clung to because the whole consequence of a life can depend on it. Come on, baby. Come on. I have a literary crush coming. Reading these quotes out loud, I've only typed them and read them, but saying them out loud, like, he's tingling my brain, man. It's that divorce between the mind that desires and the world that disappoints. Player, yes. Preach to me. My nostalgia for unity, this fragmented universe, and the contradiction that binds them together. I'm getting chills. The absurd, godless world is then peopled with men who think clearly and have ceased to hope. Camus, Dostoevsky, just Steinbeck. I'm currently reading East of Eden. I just love rebels. I really do. I love rebels. I love them. I love people who stick it to, I just love, they stick it to the man. Okay. So I'm paraphrasing this a lot. I'm condensing this quite a bit, but Camus does evaluate, he takes science and he takes religion and he takes the divine and he meshes all of these together in his argument, and he does, obviously Camus is a man who's going to appreciate science, but he acknowledges in this work that science does not solve everything. The man does have something else that science cannot get at. There's something in the soul. There's something he's acknowledging a divine. Now, Camus' own religious beliefs, I believe at one point he was an atheist, but I think maybe somebody correct me. I had to research this. I researched this quite a while ago and my mind is hazy, but he was wondering, like, does God exist? I don't think he exists. I think he exists. There was some tension there. I'll just say that. Don't quote me. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But he does acknowledge that science is not always the answer. There are certain matters of the soul that science will not cure for man. That is how I'm going to sum that up. But how did I write it? It has its limitations when it comes to explaining the deeper needs and longings of man. I realize that if through science I can seize phenomena and enumerate them, I cannot, for all that, apprehend the world. Reason bears a quite human aspect, but it is also able to return toward the divine. Science, likewise, having reached the end of its paradoxes, ceases to propound and stops to contemplate and sketch the ever-virgin landscape of phenomena. The heart learns thus that the emotion delighting us when we see the world's aspects comes to us not from its depths, but from their diversity. Explanation is useless, and the sensation remains, and, with it, the constant attractions of a universe inexhaustible in quantity. The place of the work of art can be understood at this point. This is why I said, just with that quote alone, because it was quite a mouthful, Camus, this took me so long to read for such a slim volume because his language is so rich, and I would read a few pages and I would have to often read multiple sentences over and over again just to sit with it. You know what I mean? So again, in that last sentence, the place of the work of art can be understood at this point. I'm going to get into the man creating at the end, but he's just saying that this is where the arts start to come in, art, I'm going to get into that later, but science and art, we need a world that has both to have a well-rounded articulation of what the human experience is. So briefly, I discussed the concept of freedom in this text and how death can provide a type of freedom. Remember, he's arguing here why men contemplate or commit the act of, taking their own life. But he also, in discussion with this idea of freedom, He does bring religion into play, whether you agree with him or not, with his views on God or a lack thereof, perhaps. He's arguing like, if man has religion, are you free? Is that freedom if you have a master? But he's referring to God as a master. I guess that may often depend. He's discussing the Christian God here, the God of the Bible. But, again, myself as a Christian, I know how I would refute him, but I get the question. I get the question. Like, if you are a religious person or a person of faith, do you have free will? We do have free will. I just believe there are consequences to your free will. I also believe that it depends on how you view God. Is your God a wrathful God that never has any grace, right? Are you stuck in the Old Testament in a lot of ways, even though there's actually a lot of grace in the Old Testament? Are you stuck in the Old Testament? Are you marrying the New Testament and the Old Testament and looking at it as a complete work and reading between the lines and sitting with it and meditating with it, right? Or is it a God of balance? Is he a God of balance? So that's another conversation for another day. That's not what I'm here to debate. But again, I love these kind of questions, even if I know how I would rebuttal. I love hearing how people, I love this train of thought. I love it. So anyway, I'm hype. Can you tell? Again, I don't, it is sometimes, this is what I say when I read books. It's not necessarily for me, whether I agree or disagree with the author. It's how it's relayed. And he asks really good questions. Okay. And I'm of the belief that as a person of faith, it is my job to ask questions. Do you know how many times I have cracked over the Bible and I'm like, God, what you mean? That's how I talk to him. I'm like, what does this mean? I don't understand. The math ain't mathin'. I need you to make this clear to me. And then I start to do research and I listen to the theologians and I listen to the apologetics and I listen to the counter arguments to things. And like ask questions. I ask questions. Ask God questions. He will answer you. Okay. For it is linked in quite a different way with the problem of God. Knowing whether or not man is free involves knowing whether he can have a master. That's so good. To the extent to which he imagines a purpose to his life, he adapted himself to the demands of a purpose to be achieved and became the what of his liberty? Lassie. That is a typo, you guys. I think I know where this is in the text. 1 second. Gosh. Let me reread that because lassie is supposed to say slave. Siri, knock it off. To the extent of which he imagines a purpose to his life, he adapted himself to the demands of a purpose to be achieved and became the slave of his liberty. The man got some bangers. I love alpacas. Death, too, has a patrician hands with, while crushing, also liberate. So finally, Camus' prescription, if you will, his antidote, I keep saying anecdote, his antidote, his resolution to this existential crisis of man's soul and this desire of like, I'm so at odds with the world around me. I'm not satisfied. Something is missing. There's a void. His answer is to create. And through creation, creation provides man an outlet for his dread. But it does provide a contentment in life because you're finally able to marry what you're going through with this outlet. And then that out is being consumed by other people. Sometimes whether somebody else sees it or not, is an outlet. And he goes through the greats. Like he talks about Dostoevsky and Camus was a fan of Dostoevsky's work. And he goes through like Don Quixote and all these other iconic texts and how you can look at these iconic authors, these timeless authors, and see how they were answering this question for themselves. They were battling with this question themselves. I am like a D-Money Dostoevsky fangirl, okay? It's obvious in Dostoevsky's work, but like Notes from Underground, relatable, like painful relatable. But Also, actually, that would be an excellent pairing. Reading Notes from Underground, no Notes from the Underground, and the Myth of Sisyphus. Yeah. But yes, in the universe, the work of art is them the sole chance of keeping his consciousness and of fixing its adventures. Creating is living doubly. Come on, playa. If the world were clear, art would not exist. I'm trying not to get up out of my seat and do a Pentecostal church stomp. Okay, he preaching to me. Negating on the one hand and magnifying on the other is the way open to the absurd creator. He must give the void its colors. Poetry snap. Of all the schools of patience and lucidity, creation is the most effective. It is also the staggering evidence of man's soul dignity, the dogged revolt against his condition, perseverance in an effort considered sterile. Yes, you know what? The more that I think about it, Notes from Underground is right here. Please hold. Dostoevsky's arguing the same thing. In Notes from Underground, this cheeky little novel, he also talks about man creating bridges and buildings and engineering and architecture. But what happens when he creates the thing? Then he has to destroy the thing to create again, to give his life meaning. Read these two books together, you guys. You guys, do it. So good. I'm fangirling. This is a slim volume too, but my goodness, it is packed. Very slim volume, but there's just so much in here. And it's so painfully relatable. Anyway, there's a reason why Camus has titled this The Myth of Sisyphus. And for me, this is a nonfiction work, so it doesn't have spoilers. But this is my first Camus. And so for me, it's at the end when he brings in this ancient Greek mythological character, Sisyphus. He's the character, the myth where he's rolling the stone up and he falls in, it rolls back down. He's just his whole life. He's rolling the stone up and down, and it's tedious. It's the habit, right? It's the absurd. And so Camus ties all of that together, and he puts a spin on this myth that is just, it's like the light at the end of the tunnel. And for me, reading it for the first time myself without somebody spoiling it just was the cherry on top at the end of this work. So I'm not going to go into why he called this the Myth of Sisyphus. If you read this for yourself, I feel like that's something that when you read it organically, it's just chef's kiss. His writing is stunning, as I've said. I'm not going to belabor this. Just, again, this is a translated work. Kudos to the translator. He just, every now and then you read an author and he just hits you in your soul. You know what I mean? It's just good stuff. I'm just enamored by Camus, as you can tell. The next Camus that I read, it'll be one of his novels, either The Plague or The Stranger. Let me know which one you think I should read next. I don't know when, but I'm going to read one of his novels. I just love this type of thinking. I just love it. I like I said, I like the heavy hitters. And I do look forward to reading more of him. I gave this a 5 out of 5. Obviously, it's in the running for. It is one of my top reads of the year. I don't have many 5-star reads this year. I'll rattle them off now. Lonesome Dove, I rated a 5 out of 5. That review is coming. The Myth of Sisyphus, A Fine Balance. I'm reading East of Eden right now. I can tell that's going to be a 5-star read. And I have some pending that could potentially be 5 stars. River by Esther Kinsky might be a 5-star for me, but definitely in the contender of the top 3, The Myth of Sisyphus. So anyway, maybe top 4. East of Eden might bump somebody off the top 3, but we'll see. Anyway, please feel free to leave me a comment below discussing Camus and where I should go next with his work. Again, I want to read a novel, either The Plague or The Stranger. Let me know which one you think I should read next, being a Camus novice. Please feel free to like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and feel free to follow me on Instagram where I get up to more bookish shenanigans. I post all of my book content there first, as well as the occasional goofy story or reel meme or reel in the Instagram stories, because I prefer to post chuckles on my Instagram. Life is hard. Anyway, I'm out. Bye.